All right. Thanks everybody for coming. So this is the first of two presentations for the role of Interim Dean of the College of Health and Human Services. And I know most people, but my name is Jennifer Harrison, and I'm a social worker, chemical addictions counselor, a professor, and the current director of the School of Social Work here in the College of Health and Human Services. And I'll be beginning as the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs on July 1st. So, and I use she/her pronouns. And I gotta say that I'm really touched. I know that on a Friday afternoon, on a lovely, summer semester Friday afternoon, it is, I really appreciate all of you taking the time to consider me and the other candidate and to provide feedback on both of us for the future of the next interim dean of our college. So really appreciate that. I do have a QR code to my curriculum vitae. If you'd like to access that, then that's available for either people that are logging on in the simulcast or that are here live, because I know that folks didn't have an opportunity to pre-review those. And so let me just talk a little bit about, I'm going to be talking for about a half an hour, and then we'll have a half an hour of Q&A from the folks that are here. And so I'll go ahead and then we'll invite any questions and comments once I'm done with my presentation. So a little bit about me, kind of my curriculum vitae in one or two slides. I completed my Bachelor's of Science in Psychology and Women's Studies from Michigan State University, my Master's of Social Work from the University of Houston, and then my PhD in our own Interdisciplinary Health Sciences PhD program here at Western Michigan University. I've been involved in clinical and administrative practice in a variety of places, so I'm kind of a mid-career joiner of a full-time career in academia. So I've been a practicing social worker and an administrator in rural health clinics, in the community mental health system, in private practices, in hospitals, in schools, and in juvenile justice settings throughout my career, and then joined actually as a part-time instructor in 2006 with the School of Social Work, and then joined the school as a full-time faculty member and our director of field education in 2011. Then got tenured in the role as a faculty specialist, and then was selected for a traditional rank faculty role in 2015, was then subsequently tenured in that role, and then started in 2019 as the interim director of the School of Social Work, and then was promoted to full professor and became the regular director in 2022. So that's a little bit of what I've done. I've had kind of that full bevy of faculty experiences, as well as some of the initial administrative experiences in higher education at Western Michigan University. And so, like I mentioned before, that I'm also the incoming dean, which I'm really thrilled with, for academic affairs in the college. Some of my other background in terms of research and service and teaching. A lot of my research is focused on how we implement evidence-based practices in the behavioral health sphere, but also in integrated health and human services more broadly, in workforce development, which has been where a substantial amount of my funding has come from on a federal and also a statewide and foundational basis, and also on outcome measurement. And in all of those research projects, I've worked with colleagues in several different areas and disciplines within our college to make sure that we were creating win-wins for publication, for presentation, for external funding, and just for making sure that we used all of our disciplines, which all work together in the health and human services spheres, that we were doing that same work within our college. In teaching, most of my teaching is focused on clinical practice, on field education. I've done some teaching on grant and proposal development and management, on study abroad courses. So I've developed two different study abroad courses on trauma, specifically on trauma in working with military and veteran members and their families, and then also on change processes, on implementation of motivational interviewing, on getting at how complex change happens in the workforce and in behavioral health areas, and how we can support that change as providers. And then in service, I've been the chair of our curriculum committee at the college level as well as at the unit level. I've been involved in global engagement in collaboration with Heineke Institute, as well as global institutions, primarily in Mexico, in the Netherlands, in Israel, in Guatemala, and in India. And then I've been a field instructor. I've been in clinical practice. Actually, this is the first 4-year period that I've been out of clinical practice in my whole career, which is wonderful to really lean into administrative practice. But I've had a behavioral health practice for about 27 years out of the last 32 since I was licensed. And then also I've been involved as part of that, keeping active in the field of research and working with health and human services practitioners. I've been involved in providing training and also fidelity review and monitoring on a statewide basis and training on a national basis for addictions, for the American Society of Addictions Medicine, on making sure that practitioners understand how we can translate research and what we do in university settings into something that's really usable for them in their practice on a day-to-day basis. So I think that that's something that's relevant for many of you, that we're really working hard on that high translation research of making sure that our health and human services professionals, our students, our faculty, our staff, our community providers are equipped to provide the best evidence-based care in health and human services. So I was asked to talk about 5 different foci areas, which I have a couple of slides on each, on leadership, on vision, on collaboration, on innovation, and on student-centeredness, and on the role that I would take if selected for the interim dean position. So I want to talk about leadership first. So, some of my experience with leadership is that I'm currently the director of a school that is responsible for a little over a $3 million annual budget, and have had over $5 million in combined funding, again with partners in other areas of health and human services. Most of the external funding that I've received has been heavily focused on technology translation as well as student support, and I'm a pretty big proponent of making sure that we receive external funding and really cultivate that helps the undergraduate, graduate education process and people launching into our health and human services fields affordable and accessible and representational of the communities that we serve. So that's really important to me. And I really believe in transparency about resources, about how we utilize time and people and money, and being transparent about that, which doesn't mean that I shy away from making administrative decisions, but I believe in being pretty upfront about the way the decisions are being made and kind of the decision-making model that we're using, which is part of that clarity of decision-making model. And also, one of the things that I think I've exhibited, and I'll talk about this in a second, is just a willingness to try things out and a willingness to pilot. I think we've got a really exceptional opportunity within the next year to pilot some innovative stuff that and measure it relentlessly to see about what are we looking at, what are our metrics, so that we can decide what of those innovative processes and structures and systems are working well, and we can lead the next dean into a college that's set up for their success, and which things we maybe tried and we're like, yeah, that didn't work like we thought it would. So we're going to abandon that, but we're going to abandon it based upon data instead of based upon one person's gut feeling. So I have demonstrated leadership in the College of Health and Human Services and outside of the college with 4 years of experience in a director role, responsibility for leading a unit during significant change processes that were both related to COVID and had nothing to do with COVID, right? So I've been tested in higher education leadership in managing 2 top 100 accredited health and human services programs with complex personnel and resource needs, which a lot of the rest of you are also involved in that leadership. So, that's not, no leadership is a one-person activity, and I want to recognize that. I've been involved in enhancing our international and community footprint, completing numerous faculty and staff shifts and searches, working with faculty to make our school increasingly responsive to the needs of our new students, and then community and disciplinary needs. And that means that I've made mistakes along the way, but I have the leadership to acknowledge and correct, to be effective and equitable in decision-making within the College of Health and Human Services. I think my colleagues would say about feedback with me that I have strong fiscal leadership skills. I'm willing to share how processes will work transparently and to clarify how decisions will be made. Like, for instance, are we going to make this decision based upon a consensus building model? Are we going to vote on this decision? Is an administrator going to use feedback from stakeholders to inform their decision-making process? But to be really clear about that and to not, and to be okay with making decisions, with making hard decisions, even though that means that sometimes we're leaving other decisions on the table because we're moving one direction. That I also have demonstrated creative problem solving and a willingness to pilot initiatives, see how they'll work. This involves a sense of leadership courage to be able to be out front and representing the university and our college with stakeholders as we innovate together, and really to highlight that. And I know that when we're talking about mission, I want to talk about just, we already have, we have a vision, we have a mission, we have a set of values that we've all agreed to as part of our strategic planning process. And then the step that we're at now is to codify what those goals will be, and then also how are we going to measure? What metrics are we going to use to measure whether we're getting closer or farther away from those goals? So even though that's a collective process, I think my vision is probably best expressed in kind of those leadership tendencies or qualities that I have in terms of how we're gonna work on those goals together, and then how we're going to, again, like, have a constant feedback loop that measures back and says, like, okay, like, how are we doing and how are we measuring, and really getting to like quantifiable data in addition to mixed methods and qualitative data, so that we can measure our progress along the way and make adjustments together. So let me talk a little bit about the way I see the interim dean role kind of being most effective if I'm selected in that role. I think one of the things is, I don't think it's somebody who just keeps things from falling apart, or just is kind of like or just is that ball bearing that just keeps us in place. I don't think that we're not at a place where that's going to be sufficient, and also that wouldn't lead the next dean into being able to be successful when they walk into the next role. So I do think collaborating on establishing what strategies and what metrics we're going to use to carry out our vision, mission, values, and goals as part of our strategic plan. So that's the phase that we're at. The Strategic Planning Steering Committee, which many stakeholders were involved in throughout the college, of students and staff and faculty members and part-time instructors, have already set some initial goals, and we've decided on, I say we, like they have decided, actually not part of the Strategic Planning Steering Committee, they have decided on, how are those goals going to play out. But I think we have to decide what strategies are we going to use to meet those goals, and then how are we going to measure, and having like pretty clear accountability for now who is going to be measuring this, and how often are they going to report back, and how are we going to celebrate those successes. So I think the plan, again, to implement those first steps and really like measure so that we can continue to retool, and then to leave things a little bit better and to support the next dean. So I'm thrilled to be considered as the next interim dean of the college. I'm thrilled to be able to participate in the national search process. I don't have illusions relative to how many candidates we might have in a national search, but I hope we've got a series of super robust, amazing candidates. And at whatever point, I look forward again to transitioning over, and then to helping the next dean in the role of Associate Dean for Academic Affairs to continue to be successful and to continue to be part of that leadership team at whatever time point that is. I want to talk a little bit about both vision and collaboration relative to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In vision, so I think I was talking earlier that one of the things that we talk about a lot in social work is, if we do what we've always done, we get what we've always got. And that is not good enough in our college, because we are not yet educating a representative group of providers for the communities that we serve. And we're not yet employing enough leaders and faculty members and staff members that represent the communities that we serve. So I think we got to recruit and retain representative of folks from the communities that we serve. And that's, primarily throughout Southwest Michigan and Northern Indiana, but also into Detroit and into Northern Michigan and into Northern Indiana and into Chicago, and with some of our programs has a very national and global spectrum that we're really looking at in terms of what are the communities that we serve. So I think being mindful of that. A lot of the research that I've done is about raising up diverse voices and that voice of lived experience. So some of the research that I've done is about raising up the voice of people that have a long-term stable recovery journey from mental illness and substance use disorders, raising up the voices of people who are neurodiverse, raising up the voices of people of color who are underrepresented in our fields, raising up all of that. So that's something that I really believe in, and I think our students are key to that, but also our community providers are really key to telling us what we need to hear, and we just have to put on big listening ears. I've got big ears, so that's why I'm capable of doing this position because I already have big ears. And but so that's like the main thing that I'll employ is just big ears. So and also I think we've all been working on this with enrollment management, but I really believe like we have to, when our students and our faculty members and our staff members have dedicated so much time and energy and money and so much of their lives into getting an education or into working at Western Michigan University in the College of Health and Human Services or wherever, if we can't retain them to graduation or to retirement or to the next great thing that they're going to be doing, we have failed. So I think that when we lose people in whatever of those roles, we have to be able to say to ourselves that we did everything that we could possibly think of, that we used technology, but we also used like a real personal approach, right? Like, so I know that a lot of us as chairs and directors were sending out texts to students who haven't enrolled for fall and sending out emails to people's personal emails in addition to their Western Michigan emails saying like, are you experiencing any barriers? And if so, can I help you to resolve any of those? And actually, when someone reached out to people individually, even though I was copying and pasting those texts and those emails, so it wasn't truly individualized. But by the same token, like I was amazed at how many texts I got back as a school director that said like, thank you so much for reaching out to me. And I think that all of that we got to scale that in different ways, but also thinking about like how do we make sure that people get to the finish line, whatever finish line that is for them. And then I think being accountable to ourselves and our systems for being actively and unabashedly anti-racist. I think that is one of the great challenges of health and human services. It's certainly one of the great challenges of higher education. And I think that can get muddy when we're talking about like, oh, we just need to like all people and be fully accessible to all people. I think that can hide the racism and the sexism and the transphobia and the ableism that is embedded within our systems and structures. So I think we really have to call out those specific isms and the ways that they call out and call in underrepresented voices, but also be accountable to one another. And that means having like pretty uncomfortable conversations sometimes about like, hey, that felt kind of microaggressive to me. And sometimes I'm kind of taken aback by that and saying like, oh, okay, like I didn't think about it, but you're right. And I'm sorry, and now that I know better, I will do better. So that's some of what the vision. So collaboration, I think I talked a little bit about my collaboration style, but I think we gotta acknowledge that we've got like highly ranked, we've got amazing programs. We don't need to, there are some of the things in the College of Health and Human Services that I feel like the interim dean needs to not mess with, right? Because, we want to fix some things that are broken, but we also want to leave alone some things that are not only not broken, they're like leading the nation in what we're doing. So we've got highly ranked programs, highly recognized programs that are, that are doing all of the community-based work that we need to do. I think we have a lot of work to do on recruitment and retention, like I said, and outreach to more diverse communities to work with our students. But I think like let's give credit where credit is due, right? And let's celebrate. Another thing that I think we're doing well, but we can continue to like use those successes is we've got like, unlike some other places in Western Michigan University and in some other universities, like we've got direct experience. We've got experiential work that's being done by almost every student in our college, by almost everyone, that they are learning. One of the things that I sometimes say about social work is that social work has as much in common with plumbing as it does with psychology. We are a skilled trade. We are teaching people how to be social workers, how to do social work. And I think that that's what so many of our professions, we're not teaching people about ephemeral skills. We're teaching people about real skills that are going to impact individuals, families, and communities' lives. And that we've got a pretty strong focus on that translational research. We're doing a lot of practice-informed research and also research-informed practice in the work that we're doing. And I think we can lead that in innovation. Some of the collaboration opportunities that I see we have in the interim dean role are, I was talking about this earlier, like we all think the interprofessional, like no one is like anti-interprofessional work. Like no one is like, oh no, I think that's ridiculous, that's silly. But like the devil is in the details, right? Like, so when we're talking about coordinating internships or coordinating field placements, and one discipline has a 300-hour field placement over 12 weeks, and then another discipline has a 500-hour field placement over 9 months, and then, and they're at different places, and they've got different structures and different systems, which are in large part guided by our accreditation standards, but also are guided by the way we've always done things. So to think about what are our needs collectively, how can we like create more interprofessional opportunities for students in field, but also in some of our coursework, the chairs and directors and the curriculum committee has already started to do a big lift on that process of how do we keep students, if students are in public health, health administration, social work, community and population health pathway, how can they start out at the same place? And if they get accepted to their first choice program, that's great. But if they don't, we don't lose them, right? They don't say like, well, Western Michigan University doesn't want me, I guess. I guess I'll just go get my RN at Kalamazoo Valley Community College because, Western has rejected me. But how can we have how can we think beyond just being a doctor or a nurse? And I don't think that, and I'm not like dissing nursing or being a physician at all, but how can we say like, this is the full bevy of health and human services professions. This is all that you can be. And we all work together anyway. So how can we create opportunities for that? I really believe in, I think showing up for people is a really important value for me. And so like, I kind of believe in like the power of the potluck. I love that there's, some little treats for people to have before this kind of a Friday afternoon presentation. I believe in getting together in person. I believe in getting together remotely. I believe in getting together. And I think that all of us we're missing that, and we need to get back to having those opportunities, which means we got to be flexible about the way we do it, but also that we want to have touch points. We want to connect with one another, and we want to connect with our students. And then I also think, again, I just want to be honest that when we make choices on what to invest our time, energy, or money in, we're also, by definition, making choices about what we are not choosing to invest our time, energy, and money in. And I think I think we just need to be honest about those decisions and transparent about those decisions. And, the strategic resource management model and the enrollment management model are not about making sure that everyone's pet project is fully funded to the degree that they want it, including my pet projects, but is about thinking about like in a strategic planning framework, what are we going to invest in and what are we going to measure? And that means that there are some other things that we're probably going to leave on the table that are not bad ideas, but we're not going to invest our time, energy, and money in them, at least not right now. So, and, I thought I had one more. Okay. These are some things that I focus on in terms of innovation. I believe in partnership and finding new partners to work on with each successive project. So kind of inviting new people in as I have been invited in. And I'm so appreciative of that, of having lots of opportunities. I think that also feeds into diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, because we have to be able to invite, again, underrepresented, underappreciated voices to the table, because otherwise we keep on kind of like recreating our predominantly white institution, able-bodied or temporarily able-bodied models that don't represent who we serve. So I also like this position. I'm fully capable of doing this position. I'm excited about this position. I think I'm the best candidate for this position. I also believe in taking roles where the learning curve is a little steep. And I think that anyone who's in the interim dean position in our college is going to have a steep learning curve. And so whoever gets selected cannot be afraid of that. Cannot be afraid to learn, to make mistakes, to have a sense of humor about that, to be transparent about that, and all that. So that's part of what I believe in, because I think otherwise, I was actually talking earlier in my interview with the provost team, and we were talking about, can you innovate too fast or innovate too slow, and how do you know? And my response was, I think a lot of times in higher education, when we err on innovating too slow. And I think that we could pick up the pace a little bit. And that's going to involve making some errors, but also not staying stuck in models that really haven't existed for us in 10 years or more. Because we will absolutely get left behind if that's what we do. That I really believe in supporting faculty and students to be scholars in their own right, and I think that has a pretty broad definition, right, of making sure of holding students accountable to very high standards, of providing all the supports that they need, and then to celebrating their successes in whatever form they come. And I think even for tenured promotion, like to not have it be like this secret black box process where you just like have to do it on your own or with whoever can help you, but to actively work on like, okay, so how do you write a grant with your colleagues, and how is Dr. Santos going to help people with working in teams as the Associate Dean for Research and Graduate Programs to write the grants that are going to be successfully funded, or maybe not successfully funded, because again, if you get all the grants you apply for, you're not applying enough. Like if your hit rate is 100%, you're not doing it enough, because your hit rate should not be 100%. That's that you're not doing enough writing. Or if every article that you submit is accepted without any revisions, well, first of all, that's a big yellow flag for any then you're doing a pay for publication scheme you didn't realize. But also then even if 100% of your articles are eventually accepted for publication, then you're not writing enough, or you're not submitting enough. So, and then I think that, so, as a social worker by training, there are times when I've had people say like, you have become an administrator, which actually I've been an administrator for like years and years and years in my career. But I think what that sometimes means is having an eye towards fiscal responsibility and kind of commercialization, and what does it cost, and what are the revenue, like how do we line up revenue with costs, which the SRM model is enabling us to do increasingly. But I do think that we got to think about that. We're providing an education, and there's a purity to that, and we're teaching people to be health and human services professionals, and we also want to make payroll, and we want to have the resources that we need to keep the lights on. So I do think that to think about those dollars and cents is really necessary, and to think about like what kinds of innovation and what sorts of collaboration have market value to them in terms of setting us up as a college of distinction, as a university of distinction, as a university that draws people, but also like what things are we doing throughout the College of Health and Human Services that it's like, you know what, like somebody would like to buy that product. I think about just a bunch of different things. The app that Dr. Shaplo and I have developed, the Sendlor boot, a bunch of the stuff around opioid treatment and testing that have like real commercial value. And I think oftentimes in health and human services, we're great researchers, we're great faculty members, we're great clinicians, but sometimes we're kind of reluctant capitalists about like, I struggle with, I want to just give it away, and I just want it to be in the field, and I have to think about sometimes like, no, this has value to it, and it's okay for Western Michigan University, for researchers, for students to be able to get that value out of it in the same way that it's good for us to do that as a university. There's got to be some reason to come to the College of Health and Human Services other than that it was like the least objectionable option. Like I never want that to be the case, that it was the least objectionable option. So I know that we've talked increasingly about our pathways, and I think I've got some ideas about how we might be able to kind of like take those to the next level in terms of thinking about, again, like the multiple options that students, that faculty, that staff have to collaborate and to innovate and to have multiple options within health and human services. So student-centered approach, these are a couple of the strategies that I would use. I think we need to outreach into our communities. Like, we can't stay here in the College of Health and Human Services, or even here in Kalamazoo, here in Grand Rapids, here in Benton Harbor. We actually have to go to our community colleges and to our high schools and to our healthcare organizations and to our affinity group organizations and make the case of why the College of Health and Human Services is not only a great education, but a really excellent return on investment for people that are considering investing for families that are considering investing a lot of time, energy, and money. And by that, I mean also students who are Kalamazoo Promise recipients and students who are Bearcat Promise recipients. Like, we can't just assume that they're going to choose Western Michigan University because they have lots of choices and oftentimes have lots of qualifications. So we want to make the case for why, graduating with your degree from the College of Health and Human Services is, it's going to set you up. And that also kind of relates to my last point about building that cycle that takes people from middle school to Western Michigan University to community practice and alumni status and like even development process that I think we lose track of people once they graduate. We kind of like don't care about them until they apply. So, it's not that we don't care about them, but we don't attend to them enough until they apply to Western Michigan University. And then sometimes when they graduate, we're like, great, good for you, we'll celebrate with you, but we lose track of them. And they are literally going to be our health and human services professionals for the most part for the rest of our lives. They're going to be our speech language pathologists, they're going to be our social workers, they're going to be our nurses, they're going to be our physician assistants for probably, the rest of their lives, because a lot of our folks, even though people like definitely practice internationally and nationally, a lot of our folks are going to be practicing in our own communities, and that's a good thing. But it means we better keep in touch with them because they're our people. So I think I've talked about this a little bit, but we really, if we're going to be student-centered, then we got to recruit and retain Black and Latinx and Indigenous and international students, but also staff and faculty, so that people can see that pathway exists for them as a Black or Latinx or Indigenous or international or Asian Pacific Islander student, or as a gender and sexual orientation minority student, or as an international student, or as someone who's neurodiverse or has different levels of ability or disability. So we do have to be able to see that in our college in order to be that thing in our practice. I think we've talked a lot about in our college, and one of the things that I look forward to in either role is to really develop a series of co-curricular programs that's kind of modeled, to be perfectly honest, on the Hayworth College of Business SPURS model that gives our students that sense of like, we don't want you to just come here to attend classes. We want you to come here to attend the Lunch and Learn series for diversity, equity, and inclusion. We want you to be here to be part of registered student organizations. We want you to be here to engage in the experiential activities. We want you to be here to engage in simulations and tabletop activities, and to lead emergency management in our university and in our community by being an exemplar for that, to lead interprofessional work by participating in those activities. So I do think that involves that we have co-curricular activities that we package and market better. We have a lot of co-curricular activities, but we don't package them nicely. And also it means like maybe silly stuff, but people need badges. People need badges in some format. They need to know now you're a health and human services explorer candidate. It's like, now you're a brownie in the health and human services field, or whatever. We'll come up with way better names than that. I have a knack for kitschy acronyms, so I'll work on it. So, and then doing more of what we're already doing, but I think we can amplify this even more, bringing students to the community, but also bringing the community to our students, right? So we started with our continuing education, with our professional development, doing a lot of co-sponsored activities every time members of the community come to us for the Veterans Mental Health Summit, for the Stomp the Stigma Black Teen Mental Health Awareness. They're always like, oh my gosh, this building is amazing. This college is so cool. And we're like, it is. It is cool. We'd love to talk to you about if you have thoughts about being a mental health provider, with others in the Black community. That is a super needed, very marketable skill. So let's talk about how we can get you into college and being a provider and being a field instructor for students 20 years from now, and being a donor alumni person, and kind of leading our community. So talked about that. I want to talk just for a minute about what you get with me, and then I'll open it up for, and I think this was actually one of the slides that I had in the Associate Dean presentation too. So because it's about what I bring and what I don't bring. So I would hope that hasn't changed in the last month and a half. So I believe in working smarter, but until I can figure out how to work smarter, I will work harder. I will work harder, kind of show up to do that hard work, which is, the other side of that is that there are some times when that means that I overdo and I gotta make sure that I maintain balance and that I take time away and I do other things and all of that. So that's work that I have to do, but I think that we all deserve, and we're all kind of like yearning for a little bit more presence and a little bit more just like, let's dig in and do this. That a sense of humor, which is also kind of like, it's a better and for worse. There are some times when my sense of humor, like people will be like, "Oh, that was a little bit of a weird comment that you made," and then I have to walk it back, or I have to realize like that my intent doesn't matter, my impact does, right? But also that I think that I'm someone who's fun to work with and fun. I believe in kind of working hard, playing hard, and of having a pretty inclusive, fun atmosphere where people want to engage in those co-curricular activities and people want to spend extra time hanging out in the college. People want to get involved and we want to bring the community in because it provides a richness and kind of the atmosphere that we've been missing for a few years. That staying committed, even though I'm okay with conflict, so I don't shy away from, I've been a clinician for years and years. I don't shy away from conflict. I'm fine with conflict. I'm fine with kind of naming and claiming, like, this is the decision that I've made, and so, like, now we're at the implementation stage. We're not going to talk this to death for the next 4 months. We're going to do it, and we're going to identify barriers that come up, but we're going to figure out how to overcome those barriers, because we're at least going to give this, as they would say in the business, the good college try, to make sure that it has as much opportunity to work. So. And also that my intention is to stay at Western Michigan University for the rest of my career, and so that I'm here. I'm here, and I think that's mostly a positive of just saying, like, hey, I'm committed to this college, I'm committed to the work that we all do, so I'm not gonna hose things up and then just be like, see ya, suckers. That's not who I am, and that I really value. I operate with values at the core of the work that I do and of the life that I lead, which are really about transparency and about justice and about clarity and about achievement and about raising up partners in my life. So that's one of the things that I would do also in the interim dean role. So, and thank you so much for considering me for this role and for providing feedback a priori for me and also the other candidate, and just for participating in this whole process. And I really appreciate it. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. Yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
Sharon, I don't want to focus this as a negative, but I want to see how you deal with it.
Sure.
The meeting the provost had with us, he asked for our strengths and weaknesses we saw in the college. I took a lot of notes. There were 12 statements made. They were all weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
Not one true strength. And then people talked about siloing.
Yeah.
Which, you know what I mean, like in the school.
Yeah, oh yeah. Within disciplines, within departments.
And the research would indicate that those two things would indicate that morale is on a decrease and not on an increase. You said a lot of things you're going to do. How would you apply those to turning that around?
Yeah, so I think in terms of some of the so I think there's two separate issues that you're bringing up. One of them is kind of the siloing of higher education, or of higher education and health and human services as a trend, and how the more siloed you are, the less reflective you are of the way practice in health and human services works, because really practice is very interprofessional by definition and by implementation. So I think some of the work that several of you have started, that I've been a small part of, in terms of thinking about how do those pathways go into like program structures so that people can start at a central place, students can start at a central place and then veer off in a variety of different disciplines, but it kind of necessarily means that there's more content and more curriculum that we're offering interprofessionally, that we think about our field experience in more interprofessional ways. So I think that's part of how we address siloing. I think another way that that we address that is to have, interprofessional research and practice pods that are working together, that are kind of like thrown together around a shared research interest or a shared curricular interest and end up finding really innovative ways. And I think that there are ways to apply small seed funding to reward like those great ideas that come out of that. That, often, we all want, everybody wants the multi-million-dollar grant, but in the interim, like sometimes you can hire an undergraduate student to do some transcription at $15 an hour, and for $2,000 you can get a lot of output. Or you can, you can do stuff with kind of like small and also, like kind of like a grant is a grant is a grant is a grant. And so I think that when we have success on that on an interprofessional basis, then it kind of like leads us into larger projects. So those are some of the ways that I think that the interim dean can set the stage to allow for that great work to happen. But I think that's kind of all the interim dean does, or all any dean does, to be perfectly honest, is to kind of like set that framework and then allow people to do great work. And in terms of, and I've actually thought a lot about this and talked to a lot of I am especially concerned about morale on the part of staff members, and I've been pretty upfront about that, and I've sent in collaboration with staff members that I have the opportunity to work with a bunch of ideas to different people in the university leadership about ways that I think we could address that. And I think that, part of it, it's not just students who want a sense of belongingness, right? Like we all do. We all want to feel like we belong and we're valued. And so I do think that that's, it's big things like looking deeply, which we just did, about our compensation and how that lines up with market values of compensation, and resulted in almost a $2 million increase in staff compensation across academic affairs. But it also, so it means big things. They're costly things. And it means looking at our benefit structure and looking at the way we offer different types of flexibility for people in their work that they do. But I think it also means small things. It also means grab a slice of pizza on a Friday afternoon. It also means we have a good idea contest, and the best good idea that we can even consider implementing gets a $200 prize. And that we have a little whatever with electronic confetti that says like, oh, congratulations for student employee Jane Doe, who came up with the best good idea that none of us thought of because we're like too enmeshed in the work that we do, but may have been a $20,000 savings idea or revenue generation idea, and for the cost of $200 and like reinforcing for staff, for students, for faculty, for whoever has the great ideas in small ways and big ways, we get a lot out of that. So I think sometimes we have the privilege within our college of having some subvention funds that are coming back to us because of the revenue that we're generating at a college, and because we're a highly valued and highly ranked and highly competitive college in our disciplines. And so I think that gives us some latitude to do some of those small things, and sometimes some medium-sized things, to address the siloing and the morale issue. Yeah, go ahead, Jan.
Hi. In the dean role, you need to support chairs and directors, and one of their issues is not all faculty are equally motivated to grow, improve, and or even communicate with their colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you help set an environment or a culture that would get everyone, and I'm sure everyone here has the potential, but to work closer to their potential to do their best in their role?
Yeah. So I believe in differential reinforcement, and I think that sometimes that kind of you find what's reinforcing for each individual and find ways to support. And I think too often our differential reinforcement only comes in the form of workload release, which is essentially like taking people out of the classrooms more. Which is okay, because people have other important tasks that they're doing. But there are some times when I think like, I don't want you out of the classroom more. I want you in the classroom more. Like, you're such an amazing teacher. And I do feel like that almost sets up we were actually talking about this a couple of weeks ago, that sets up that teaching is like the least valuable thing that we do, and I don't think it is. I don't think it's the least valuable thing that we do. So I think that sometimes finding ways to honor and to recognize people that don't involve money or workload is something that we can do. And I think, to be honest, like there are some times when we have to like let some people, a very small minority of people kind of like fade into the background. Somebody asked me a question earlier about like, oh, what if you say to faculty like, hey, we're going to get a hold of students who aren't enrolled or who have been accepted but haven't confirmed their admission, and there's a faculty member that says, I'm not going to do that. That's not part of my job. There's part of at least my internal dialogue is like, well, good, because I don't want you reaching out to students because you're a grumpy Gus. That doesn't sound like a very inviting like outreach opportunity. And I think there's other work, so we can hold people accountable for their workload and for the contract. That's something that I've had to do in the School of Social Work is to say sometimes in pretty unambiguous terms like, well, I want a workload release for this. Okay, what that will cost you is 0.125 FTE salary and fringe. So bring that to the table, and then we will have that discussion about where you want that to come out of your workload. And until or unless you bring that to the table, we don't need to have that discussion because we're going to be equitable across faculty members, and I'm not cutting special deals for special people. I think the other way to support chairs and directors is to not do an in-run around them, which I think all of us have seen in different organizations. I'm not even talking about in the College of Health and Human Services, but if people talk to their chair and director, or if they don't even talk to their chair and director and just can go to the dean to get the special deal for special people and to get the Star-Bellied Speeches deal, then what's the point of being a chair or director? Then you have then you have lots of responsibility and zero authority. So I think the other part of that is just like when people come to me as the director of the School of Social Work and say like, I think that my professor should change my grade and this, that, or the other thing, and they didn't respond to me the way that I wanted to. And I'll say like, okay, in social work, we operate by a code of ethics. So let's look at how we're supposed to address colleagues that we have concerns with in our code of ethics. So the first step is that you talk to your professor about what your concerns are. And if you need my help or my facilitation in talking to your professor, I'm glad to provide that. But that's your first step. So if you've taken that step and you are not satisfied with the results, then you talk to me. Then you talk to the dean. Then you talk to the provost. Then you talk to the president. Then you talk to the board of trustees. But I don't want to hear not that people can't go to the board of trustees anytime they want to, but I don't want to hear like that, hey, like as a professional social worker or as an upcoming social worker, I decided to like go straight to the president of the university, because I'm going to be like, you skipped several important steps there. So I'd like you to go back, check our code of ethics, and just redo. And it's a learning opportunity. If all of our students knew everything, if all of us knew everything that we needed to know, we wouldn't be lifelong learners. But I do think that supporting them is also about not cutting side deals. Other questions? I take it from those two, your decision is easy. No, I know. All right, go ahead, Laura.
So I'm curious how you feel like we as faculty, as chairs and directors, can support whoever is in this next role.
Yeah, so I think kind of honesty and transparency about communication, and I think that sometimes that takes, like, we can't shortcut that. We just have to spend the time in communication and in relation with one another, and whoever's in the interim dean role and who's ever in the chair and director role, and who's ever in the faculty roles and the staff roles and all of that. And I think that by doing that, we're modeling how that works in health and human services and how that works between professionals for all of our students. Like, in addition to, needing to have big ears, I sometimes say, like, our students have very big eyes for this. Like, they are watching us and they are learning how they're supposed to be as health and human services professionals from our example. And so, like, be mindful of that you're, if you're being vicious with people that you have power over, then you're not modeling what, I don't think that's what you want, the way you want to train people to be as a profession. So I think that like open communication and honest communication, I think accountability for the person, and I think that oftentimes accountability, like I'm more receptive of accountability when it's done more privately, right? Like, nobody likes to be called out in like huge public setting. Sometimes that's the way it has to happen, but nobody appreciates that. So I think whoever is in the interim dean role, if I'm in the interim dean role and chairs and directors or faculty or staff or anybody are like, hey, you know what, when you did or said that, I didn't like that, and this is why, and this is what I wish you would have done instead. I would hope that they would have that conversation with me, transparently, with me and probably just me, or just me and a small group of people that were talking about the same issue. And if it can't happen that way and it has to happen like in a really public or kind of like really embarrassing way, then sometimes I have to say to myself, like, okay, like I get, after I walk away from this exchange, which I won't walk away from without dealing with, but after I walk away, like I may need to go to the bathroom and splash some water on my face and kind of like, ooh, okay, like that was an ouch, even though it's necessary, like, thick skin, develop it, it's good for you. But still, and I think that's part of that, I think allowing a dean to have like real humanity, which means that they are funny and super imperfect and held to high standards, but also part of a pretty great team of staff and faculty and other administrators who are working together with them. And then I think kind of the last thing is to think about how we can show up for each other and also for our students. Because I think I think how we show up for each other has to be centered in equity. And so again, it's not a special deals for special people kind of showing up for each other, but how we can create community for one another. But I think again, that models for our students like what the way health and human services professions work. So I think that and our students are increasingly wanting more and more of that. And I know that we're kind of in the middle of a model shift of, how much are we offering a lot of different formats and different opportunities? Yes. But also like people want some in-person stuff too. I want some in-person stuff too. In addition to the accessible formats that we're offering, which some students may exclusively access that, but I think we can't just be like, we're not a fully online school. We're not a fully online university, and I don't want to be a fully online university. So I think we have to do both and. But it means for most of us, like, that we probably need to, like, even if we're doing both and, we're probably doing it here more and more so that we can be in relationship with one another. All right. Yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
I don't want to dominate, but how would you increase the linkage between, I'd say, the people in this building and the unified clinics? They were set up to have just a total linkage, and that is lessened, as you know, over the years.
Yeah, so I know, like, we've talked about with the Resiliency Center for Children and Families, with all of the programs, which I think is part of our commercialization. I know it sounds weird to talk about like a clinic as a commercial, but it is. It is a commercial enterprise that we're getting third-party payers, and people are paying for professional services. And sometimes the best professional services, the highest end professional services that we have throughout our community, that are recognized throughout the whole community, throughout the state, throughout the region, throughout the nation. I think I've even had ideas about, should we think about like that more direct linkage, like should we have each clinic be a fund and cost center that is managed along with the other fund and cost centers in each unit or department? That I think that might be part of how we align it. It's certainly like we got to think about, because we've got workload and we've got student internships and we've got course fees, but sometimes like they come in one place and then they just shift over to another place, and I think that is where that disconnect happens. And I think so. I actually I did a day a week of clinical services at the Behavioral Health Services Clinic for several years. Loved it. Was good at it, was able to supervise students. It was all the same reasons that all of us that are in clinics love doing that clinical work and do that clinical precepting. But I did feel like it was, it almost felt like moonlighting to me. And I don't love that approach, that it's like this totally separate, like carved out. we can literally see it. We can walk to it in 3 minutes. So why, And it's a hallmark of our college and our university. So like why we're not bringing it in more in our marketing, in our kind of our focus of student retention efforts, in our let's all walk over here together and attend a lecture that's being given by the expert in the field of low vision sciences, and why don't we like bringing them here. So I do think that I've thought about different structural ways of how we might administratively make that link more significant, but I think you're right. Like, you know, I mean, we have to, or we'll kind of, and also like we can't afford for the Unified Clinics to be a loss leader and for the Center for Disability Services to be a loss leader. Like they're too important of services and training grounds and just like expert clinical services to just have them be like, yeah, well, I guess you could go over there, but we don't really know what's going on there. Like there are sometimes even as a director of a school that I've made really significant efforts to make sure that the Children's Trauma Assessment Center is like deeply embedded, that, you know, kind of like what I tell Jim Henry is I want to make sure that we take credit for every success at CTech. Joint credit with other professions, but, you know, I want to make sure that we know that Jim Henry, full professor of the School of Social Work, you know, is the principal investigator on XYZ or is in this article or, you know, like whatever. That all of those successes are our college's successes. And so I think that's even the other thing is that's some of that disconnect when faculty go over to Unified Clinics, like they get forgotten about by their home departments. And so I think that's more about like a marketing and communications issue than anything else. And raising people up for, we place value on the clinical provision of health and human services here, and that's unique amongst other colleges. You know, in aviation, they place value on, you know, people that are excellent aviation scientists. They're doing the work of aviation, that are being pilots and being mechanics and all of that. But we have this unique role, and I think we got to leverage that a little bit more. All right. I don't want to keep people past the time that we allotted, so thank you again. I really appreciate it.
For such a great job talk, I guess we could call it.
Yeah. Thank you.
I just wanted to quickly just talk again about the process that we've been taking. First, I had a chance to meet with the chairs and the staff leaders I guess it's about 2 weeks ago now. Then we had the town hall that same week, and in that town hall, we asked staff and faculty for nominations for this role. And we had about 20 nominations from staff and faculty, which represented 8 unique individuals. 2 individuals stepped forward by the deadline and agreed to give job talks. So we just had one of those candidates, and in about 30 minutes we'll have the final candidate. So then you might be thinking to yourself, well, what's next? So our team, the provost, I call it the P-Suite team, the provost council team, we have already interviewed both candidates this morning. We spent an hour with each and did scenario. Is it hard to hear back there?
A little bit.
I'm sorry, but I was on the Pine Creek Reservation yesterday, and they had me out in this beautiful meadow, and there was all this pollen floating around me, and I knew it was going to be my life for the next 24 hours. So I'm sorry I'm a little scratchy today, but that's the price you pay for being out in nature in Michigan in the summer, right? So I'll try to up the volume a little bit here. So we have 2 candidates. So what's next is they'll both give job talks today. Chris, Senior Associate Provost, has some QR codes for you to scan with your phone and do the Paulatrix feedback, and there's, I don't know, 4 or 5 questions there for you. We really want you to see both job talks so that you have, the ability to compare. Once we do that work, our team will sit down again and look at all the feedback that has come in, look at our conversations with the candidates, and then once we have a recommendation, I will go to the president and discuss that recommendation with him. And so that's what's left. Any other questions for me at this time, right here?
During our open talk that we had with you, a lot of mention was about transparency. Can you tell me the thought process about not announcing the candidates or providing their CVs in advance? First time in 3 or 4 decades I've experienced such things.
Yeah, I guess that's probably taken that from Kentucky. It was the approach that they had because of sort of the politicking and all the other things that happens until the talks. CVs should be available. I know Jennifer's made her available. The other candidate, we can make those available. And we also want to encourage people to attend both conversations. So we want there to be a little bit of gravitas to the announcement, so to say. But of course, this is a public process. Both the candidates will meet with you publicly. So that's the approach. I think we've also sort of set a precedent with this college is that now everybody wants a town hall when there's a leadership change. So I think that's a real positive to meet with the leadership, have town halls. I'm going to tell you, at other institutions that I was at, the provost never had town halls or conversations about these things. It was just done behind the scenes. So we do want to be as community engaged as we possibly can be. Are we going to always be perfect? No, we won't always be perfect, because I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of things that we are also doing in addition to the search, and so my team, they're pulling their hair out with all, because there's other things. We're doing marketing right now. We're doing vice provost for equity. There's a whole huge thing. So occasionally we might drop the ball. So if we do, just let us know if you feel like that. But we do want to be as transparent as we possibly can in these processes. So we can get you the CVs for both candidates. Any other questions? So I think there's cookies. I mean, I'm the kind of person that likes free food, especially sugar. So I think my team might have overdone it with the cookies. There's like 5 trays out there, so I hope you have children or husbands or wives or partners or whoever, and so please take as many cookies and home as you possibly can. So I don't know if we're gonna all be able to eat all those cookies before the end of the day. So the next talk will start at 3:30. It'll be the same format, and but then again, let's give Jennifer a hand. Having served as a dean for 4 years, it's a tough job, and to really put yourself out there to serve your community and to serve your colleagues, it's a tough job. So I want to thank them for being willing to step forward in this. It's tough work. All right, great. So we got 30-minute break.